Hello guys, you're welcome back to Daily Code Work. Today we are going to look at another demo on how to secure our RESTful API. This time around, we're going to be using JWT Authentication, right? We're going to implement the JWT Authentication in the modern way with Spring Boot. You know, the last demo we did was with basic authentication, how to secure our RESTful API with basic authentication. So this was the project we created last time, right? So this was the project we created last time. In case you have not watched this, in case you missed this demo, you can just follow the link below to download the project from my Git repository, and you set it up in your machine so that it works, right? So this is where we stopped in our last project. Right now, if I run this project, let me just quickly, maybe let me open up. This is the configuration we made just with basic authentication here. Right, we made it with basic authentication and just with few API configuration, nothing much here with password encoder, and it actually worked as expected. So this one was the user details, our custom user details we created, and this one is our custom user details service we created as well. So if you have not watched this demo, please follow the link below this video to download the code, the source code from my Git repository, so you set it up so you can follow up with the JWT authentication. Now quickly, I just want to hit the run button, so we can just hit this play button here so we can run this project and actually see how it works to this level. Okay, so now we see that our project has started, right? So our project has started. So now what we're just going to test is this, because the last time in this project, what we did was that we tried to lock down these three endpoints. We locked down these three endpoints for admin users only. But this one here, every other users can view books with ID, but the only admin users can add, update, and delete. So now let's go to Postman and see how this project actually works before we continue with the JWT implementation. So right here is the collection I've created for this project, and here is the book API, and here is the user API, right? So now let's try to get every book from the database. So here, this is the endpoints to get every book from the database. So what I'm just going to do here is to hit on the send button so we can take a look at the books we have in our database. So right here, we have one book from our database. So for us to be sure of what we're having, let's go to database. You see here, let me just refresh this again. And we see that we actually have just one book in our database with ID2 John Connor, first edition, Modern Spring Boot in action. So if we go back to here, we see that Modern Spring Boot in action and this and that, right? Actually, this one is just for the demo purpose. This is not the author of this book, right? It's just for the purpose of the demo. So now what we did was that we locked down this API here. Now this one here, this add new book to only admin user, right? Right now, if we go to our database, we're going to see that we have two users, just like the one we created last time in the previous video, right? Here we have two users, Samson and Rita, right? Now Rita is a user. She's not an admin, but Samson is an admin, right? So now, which means the only admin user would be one that is be able to add new book, to create new book here and update or delete. But Rita as a user cannot delete, right? What she can do is just to view. So that is what we're going to do right now. So let's try to add a new book here. Here, this is what we have gotten. This is what I've gotten here, the new book. So I'm just going to say new book in action test, right, with Morrison Kanner. Now I'm going to hit on send. Remember, we have not logged in, right? So here we have unauthorized, which means this API, this endpoint requires login. It needs to know the identity of the user that is doing this, right? So for this, we are going to go to authorization here. We're going to take this to basic authentication, because this was what we did here, right? Right now, I'm just going to change this here I'm going to change this, sorry. So I'm going to change this user to, what's happening here? Okay, so I'm going to change this user to Rita. And we know that Rita is not an admin, she's just a user, right? So which means she cannot create a book. So let's see, Rita, well, let's take it, RITA1001. This is the password. So now we're going to hit on this again, send. So now we have forbidden, right? Because this user is not an admin user. So that's why we have forbidden here, right? So now let's change this user back to something. And the password is Sam. The password here is Sam1001. Sam1001 here. So this is the password, right? Sam1001. So now before we hit on send button, let's try to get all books again and see what we got. So here we just have one book from the database, right? So now let's go back here to hit the send button now that we have put in a user with an admin role. So now I'm going to hit on send again. And here we can see that we are able to create a new book called the new book in action with ID number 8. So now if we go back here to retrieve every book we have from the database, we're going to see that we have 2 books here already. So now you see we have 2 books. And if we swing back to our book table, we see that, let me just refresh, and we see we have 2 books here already. Cool. So this was where we stopped. This is where we stopped in our last demo. So what we're going to do right now is to go back to IntelliJ and continue with our JWT implementation. So like I said earlier, if you have missed the last video on how we get here, so please follow the link below to download the code from my Git repository so you can set it up on your IDE and make sure you run it and get it working to this level. So now the first thing we're going to do here is to open up our POM file, and for this we're going to add some dependencies to our POM file here, like the JWT dependencies. So what I'm just going to do here is to copy some dependencies and paste it here, right? So here we're going to have, so here I'm just going to paste these 3 dependencies here. We have the let me just zoom in a little bit. So here we have the JWT API, and we have the JWT implementation and the Jackson, right? So you can just go to a Maven repository and search for this, and make sure you add all these to your POM file. So you can just go to your browser. For example, you can just go to your browser here and here. So you can just type here Maven repository and you hit enter. So here you will be directed. Let me try to zoom this in so it will be bigger a little bit. So just follow here to the Maven central repository here. So when you get here, just try to search on JWT. Then have API and hit enter. So now we see here, so you can just click on this and here you go. So you see that we are using the same version, right? It's 0.11.5. So just click on this. So when you click on this here, you just copy this to your POM file, and you can just go back again. If you go back again, you see that all the dependencies are here, right? So here we have the Jackson API, and here we have the implementation. We're supposed to have the implementation here too. So just check for the results, right? Clicking this here is going to take you here, right? So we have the info and we have the Jackson. So just copy this and paste it here. So after pasting it here, so we have to reload our dependencies. So right now we see that our dependencies has finished loading. So we are going to, I'm going to just close down this POM file, And I'm going to close down this controller as well, and just close down all these files, right? So the first thing we're going to do, the next thing we're going to do here is to right click on the security and create a new package in here. And this package, I just want to call it JWT, right? So here I have JWT, and just hit on enter, right? So now I'm going to create a couple of classes here that will be implementing one after the other as usual. So the first one I'm going to create here is I'm just going to call this class JWT. Sorry, I have to zoom in a little bit. Where is it? So I'm going to right click on this folder or this package and create a new class. So the first class here we're going to create, we're going to call it JWT service, right? Yeah. So here we have the JWT service, and the next class we're going to create, we're going to call this JWT controller. So I'm going to just say JWT controller and hit on enter. And the next one we're going to create is, we're going to call this one JWT authentication filter. So we're going to this one we're going to call JWT authentication filter. So I'm going to hit on enter. And the last class we're going to create here is JWT authentication request. So this one we're just going to, I'm going to right click again here and say create a new class. So I'm just going to call this class JWT authentication request here. All right. Okay. So now the first thing we're going to do here is to go to the controller, and we are going to create an endpoint here to authenticate the user, the user, right? Or better still, we're going to have here the request. The first thing we're going to create is the request. Here, this one here is just going to have the username and the password, right, of the user. So have private string username. So this one is just going to be username, and the next one is going to be private string password, right? So here we have the private strings of password, private string password. So that is what we're going to have here. And this one here, we're just going to, this one is we're just going to use, since we're using Lombok, we're just going to use the add data annotation. So we just say add data. So this one here, we get also the getter, setters, and constructor, right? So we're just going to leave this one like this. So now we are done with the JWT authentication request. So I'm going to close this down. And sorry, I forgot to shut down the server. So please, just as a good practice, always shut down the server before editing, except you're using hot module, maybe hot reloading, right, with some plugins. Okay. So now the next thing we're going to do is going to go back to the controller here, and we're going to create an endpoint to actually authenticate the username and the password, right? So that's what we're going to do here. So for that, I'm just going to create a public string authentication. I'm going to create a method here called a public method, right? Public string get token for authenticated user, authenticated user. So that is the name I'm going to call this password, get token, because this password actually, this controller actually is going to authenticate the user when the user enters the username and password. So this is the controller that we send, that we process the request to actually generate the token, the JWT token for the user after authentication, right? So that is what we're going to be doing here. So now I'm just going to request the body. Request body, and here we're just going to have the JWT authentication request here, this one here, and we'll just say auth request. We're just going to call this auth request, or maybe let me just shorten it to be auth request, right? And that is what we have. And here, sorry, okay, maybe let me a little bit zoom out a little bit. Let me zoom out a little bit. Here we have, okay, all right. So now the first thing we're going to do here is we're just going to here. So this method is going to be the one to generate the token for the authenticated user. So here we're just going to return the JWT service, right? For that, I'm going to have the object of the JWT service here, private. So we're going to auto-wire this here. Oh, what's happening? Okay, sorry guys. So here we're going to have private JWT service here, and just going to call this one JWT service. And this one is going to be auto-wired. So for that, I'm just going to have all arg constructor. So at required argument constructor. So this token is coming from Lombok, as we discussed in our previous video, right? So now, before I forget, we're just going to annotate this one too as a controller, right? At REST controller. This one is a REST controller as well here, and we are going to give the request mapping, and this one is going to be authentication. Sorry, so authentication, authenticate. We're just going to call it authenticate, right here, authenticate. So this what we need here. Now here we're just going to return JWT service dot get this method. We have not created anything here, but we're going to create this method in a moment. So dot get generated token, and here we're going to pass in the requests here, auth request dot get username here, because here we're going to so when the user enters his name and password, when the user enters their username and password, so JWT, Spring Security is going to take the username and generate a token for the username. That is what we're trying to do here actually. So this one is just going to be a post request, right? At post request, post mapping, right here. And now we're going to go to our service and create this method here. So I'm just going to create method here. Yes, create method, get generated token, right? And now before we go on, before I forget, I'm going to annotate this one as service. So we're going to give this one as service annotation, right? And now the get generated token is going to be like this. So it's going to be of type. You see here, it's taking the username as well. And here we're going to just say, we're going to define, sorry. Yeah, so this one here, yeah, map. So this one is going to be of type string, because the username is string, and the object of this is going to be object, right? For the token we're going to be generating, right? And this one we're going to call claims. We're going to discuss about this in a moment. Claims. So equals new hash map. Equals new hash map. So here we're just going to return generated. So we're going to create another method here, generate token for user, and we're going to take the claims and the username. Claims and username. So this is what we're going to have here. Now we're going to explain this one in a moment. This claim we're going to explain in a moment. So before then, there's another method here. We're going to create another public method here that is called generate token for a user, right? So here I'm just going to create a method here again, like this. And so this method here, we're just going to return the JWT strategy, or JWT set. JWTX. Oh, so it's going to be returned, right? Sorry, this is a class. Dot view there. Dot set claims. So I'm just going to write this method, and after this we're going to explain how it works, right? So we're going to explain every component after writing this. So I'm just going to write it so we can go faster, right? Set subject, username. Oh, sorry. So I'm going to break this down. The set expression new date, and so this one also is going to be from JWT, and we have system. So here we're going to set expiration time. Just like I said, let me just finish this so we can discuss about this, right? So I'm just going to call this get sign key. It's a method we're going to create in a moment. And the algorithm we're going to be using here, we're going to use a class here, this class here, algorithm signature, that's signature algorithm. The reason why we're doing this, we're going to explain in a moment, right? I'm just going to take this to HS256. I'm going to take this here. right? And here we're going to build, or we're going to compact here. So now let's try to explain this a little bit. So before we explain this, let's quickly go to JWT, JWT.io, so we can explain some few things there. So here we just go to, let's try to see JWT.io. Let's try to understand a few things about this JWT token, this JSON web token, right? So now if you look at this here, this is just JWT.io. Now if you look at this here, we have this JWT is of three. It has three components. It consists of three components. So you see the different color. We have the red, the pink, the blue, right? Or maybe purple or pink. I don't know, but I think it should be, maybe it's purple and blue. And now we see that if we go here, we see the header, the payload, and the verify signature. Now the header defines the algorithms we're using here. You see here, this one here. This is what I was trying to use here last time here. This is the algorithm I was trying to use here, this HS256. So that's the algorithm I'm using here. Sorry, what's wrong with my mouse? Here and here type of this is JWT, this is JWT, right? Now the payload actually consists of the name, this issue the username, this is the name of the user, right? And the issuer, right? And that is the subject. So now this payload contains the information of the user, and the header contains the algorithm, and the signature here, the signature contains the secret key here, the secret key, right? So these are the three components here to create JWT. Now what is secret key? The secret key is the secret that is used, that will be used to encode the token for the user, so that even if someone get access to your username without knowing the secret key, it cannot log into your account, right? So this one, the secret key is the key that is used, just like here, this like what we did here. Where is it? Here, this sign key here. So we're going to create this method here to actually get this secret key for us, where we define the secret key that will be used to build to generate this token. Now when we say claims here, now all these components here are called claims. Or this one here, the user info, all those things, they are the claims we're talking about. You're claiming who you are, and your username, and all the how will I put it, the things, the attributes, the requirements we need from the user. So that is the claim here. So for example, all the claims. Now if we go here and just say, okay, you can just check this on Google, what are JWT claims, right? So we see that the claims in a JWT are encoded as a JSON object that is used as the payload here of a JSON web signature. You see here, so the claims are used as the payload, which is the user information, like we have explained before, right? The username and all the authentication time, all those things, these are the claim. So now that is why we are calling this here, we just call this claim, right? And now this is the expiration time, right? So before we move ahead, I'm going to set up this in our property file. So I'm just going to open up our property file and set up this expiration time, right? So before we go ahead, I'm just going to, this here, we have the JWT expiration time, right? So before then, I'm going to quickly go to our property file and set up this secret key here, this expiration time here. So now I'm just going to go here and say here, I'm just going to say spring. Sorry, this is spring.jwt So we'll have spring.jwt dot secret, and we'll come to this one in a moment. So here we have spring So now I'm just going to call this one here as the expired time, right? JWT expiration time. So this one, I'm just going to put it as, let's say 1000 times 60, right? Times 30. So this one, we are saying that this generated token should expire after 30 minutes, right? So now I'm just going to convert this to milliseconds, and we're going to have 1800000, right? So we're going to have 1,800,000, right? We're going to have 1,800,000, okay? So this one here is going to give us 30 minutes after the generation of the token before it expired. Now this secret key here we're going to have this sign key here. We're going to, let's come back here to actually create this method. So this one is coming from JWT.io to have dot base 64, right? And here we're going to just pass JWT secret. So this is the secret key. This is a secret variable we have configured here. So we're going to set this in a moment. So now after this, we're going to return. Return keys dot this, right? And we just pass in the key byte. Now what are we doing here? So actually here we are going to decode the secret key we entered, right? Now this one here, this is the authentication process, because here, like we did here, when the payload is being, when the username and password is being passed into the authentication and to the project, our system. So Spring Security is going to authenticate that username and password, and if the username and password is correct, so it's going to generate this token for the user. Now the process of authentication, how do we know, how do Spring know that decoded this one again? So that's why we're going, because here we pass a secret key, right? A secret key to generate this. So now for decoding this again, we need the secret key to get it decoded, right? So that's what we're doing here. So now right here, we're going to we're going to get our secret key right now. So let me quickly go to a website called okay. So here there's a website called Encryption Key Generator, right? So this encryption key generator. So here we see that, let me just zoom in a little bit. So here we see that here we have base 64, right? Base 64 bit, 128 bit, 256 bit. So it depends on how complex you want it to be. You can take, and the more higher the number, the more complex key it will be generated. It's going to be generated. So what we're just going to do here is to take this one as 256, right? And just tick on this yes. But this one here, you say how many, we just need one line, right? So for example, you can choose how many lines you want, right, to get your depends on your requirement, the kind of level of security you want. But for this purpose of this demo, we're just going to have it at 1 and 256. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to copy this one here and swing back to our ID, and going back to our property file, I'm going to just paste this here as our secret key, right? So now we got our secret key and we got our expiration time. So how do we infuse it here? How do we put it here? So for that, I'm going to create a private, I'm going to create some variables here, some field, couple of fields here, like have private. So this one is going to be a constant, right? So we're going to create two constant here that we hold, that's going to hold that's going to hold the secret key and the expiration time, right? So here I'm just going to say private string JWT secret here, and the second one is going to be private string. No, this one is going to be int because this is going to be int because this one is the secret. Sorry, this is going to be string, the secret. So this one is going to be int because it's the expiration time, right? So here we have expiration time. So I'm just going to copy this one here. I'm going to copy this here and put it here. Just paste it here, right? So now we are going to wire value. So here we're going to wire the properties. So here I'm just going to say add value. Sorry, this is value. Oh no. So this one is value coming from Spring Bean. And here we're going to have so I'm just going to go here. So I'm just going to go here and copy this. I'm going to copy this, copy, and go here and paste it. What is it? So I'm just going to paste it here, right? This one here, sorry, it's going to be interpolated. We're going to dollars and this, sorry. So we're going to interpolate this. So now the value is going to be interpolated to this variable here, to this this is an interpolation, right? You can see that here, you can see we are getting the value from the it's showing that this variable here actually holds the secret key here that we set in our property file here, right? You can see that the line has gone away. So the same thing we're going to do for the expiration time, right? So I'm just going to copy this. I'm just going to copy this and paste it above the second one. And this one is going to be, I'm just going to go here too and copy this and paste it here. Here, I'm going to replace this. I'm going to replace this here. Okay. So now if we try to hover, maybe you see, now we see here, after hovering this, we see the value we set in our properties file. Right? So now we are done with it. We see that the error's gone away. So now what we're going to do next is to this one we're going to auto wire this. So I'm just going to say here at require our constructor. So this one we are having this from our what happened? Okay. Oh, okay. Constructor has been created already. I didn't know when this was created, so I just have to remove the constructor, and I want to auto wire. Just make it so that our code will be kind of neat, right? So I think this font is becoming too big, so I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you can actually a little bit see it clearly. Okay, cool. I think it's okay like this. Now the next thing we're going to do is to go back here to our controller. We see that this error has gone away, right? So we see that this error has gone away. Now coming back to this builder here, we have the claims, we have the username, which is the subject. So the user is the subject. So now we're getting the username, and after the authentication has been done, so this username, we're going to create, JWT is going to create a token for this username, right? And now this is the expiration time, the time issued, the issue time here in millisecond, which is the current time of our system when the token was generated. Then the expiration time which means the token should be expired, should expired after 30 minutes, which is the time we set here, right? If we hover this, we see the time we set here, which is 1800,000, right? Which is 30 minutes. It's gonna expire. Now the sign key here, sign width, which is the algorithm here for encrypting this key, right? So we're going to get this sign key here by getting the secret key to decode the key here, right? So here, the sign key here, this is the sign key, which is the secret key we passed in. So that secret key is the one that JWT is going to take to encode the token for the user. So it's going to contain here. So the three components we have here right now are the header, right? The header, the username, and all these things we have already in our JWT website. We've seen a few minutes ago. So here, this is the payload, the header, and the signature. So this signature, the secret key we just impute, we just encoded in our system. This is what JWT is going to encode here, right? To encode in 64-bit here, to encode the token for the user. So that's why here we're also using the 64-bit decoder, right? So be able to decode the secret key during authentication time, right? So that's what we do. We've just done here. All right. So now we have seen that we have finished creating the process to generate our secret token, to generate a token for the user, right? So going back to the controller, we see that this controller here, if we run the application right now, we see that this API is going to be locked down. So what we're going to do before we run this application, we're going to just copy these and go to our Spring, to our configuration file to allow this process, to allow this API for free. Because when the user enters the password, the username and the password, and this is the API they will be hitting, they will be sending, the request is going to be sent to this API. And this is the API that is responsible for generating the token. So we don't have to authenticate before coming to this API, to this endpoint, right? To this request API. So what we're going to do here is to come here and allow this. We're going to add this to unsecured URL, just like the one what we did before. So here we're going to come here and say whatever, anything, any request that is coming from this API should be allowed for free, right? So having done this, sorry, I'm going to shut down this server. Restart again. I'm just going to restart this server again, right? So now I'm just going to hit this again and let's run this project so that we see what we have gone so far. Just let's see how it runs up to this level, so that if there is any problem we need to solve, so we can fix it before we move ahead. So I'm just going to hit on this play button and run the project, so we'll see what we got so far. Okay, so we can see that our project has started without any error, right? So the project has started without any error. So now we're going to go to Postman to test our project and see. Right now, if I try to hit get all books, let's get all books. Of course, it's still going to work. But now let's try to here. I've created another folder here, and in here I've created an endpoint here, right? So here I've created this. Where is it? Okay, here I've created the API here, the authentication API. So now I'm just going to hit on this, and we are going to create a new user. So here, this is the body, and this is JSON. Just take this to JSON, and take this to post here. It's a post request, and authenticate. So now the username here should be exactly, remember, should be exactly how you declare here in your project. Where is the authentication request? So if we go to authentication request here, it should be exactly the same way it's declared here. So that is how you declare it here, right? So now we're going to create another user called, this user is going to call John. It's going to be called John. It's going to be called John. and the password is going to be called John101, John1001. So now if I hit on this send, let's see if we get, okay, cool. Yeah, so we see that our token has been generated, right? And it's of three parts: one part, second part, and third part. So now I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to copy this and go to JWT website, JWT.io. So now I'm going to, if you look here, we have the payload, the header, and the secret, as we discussed the previous time, right? So I'm just going to remove this and paste the one we've generated. So now you can see that this is the algorithm we specified, right? In our method last time. And now this is the username. This username we just entered, right? Which is John, right? Here, this guy here, this username, here. And this is the issue time, and this is the expiration time here. And here is our secret, right? So you see that we are able to generate token for our user here. Now, so let's try to generate a token for, and now if we see this user, you will see this user here. This user is not, if we go to our database, we see that this user here is not in our database. You see here, we have John, no, where's our user? Here, this is our user. So here we see we have Samson and we have Rita. So these are the only two users we have in our database. But now this user we are generating right now, it generates, but it doesn't exist in our database. So which means this token is useless, right? We cannot use it because when Spring Security is going to authenticate, it's going to load that user from the database, right? Because when it's going to decode this, it's going to decode this to load that user from the database. So this one here now, this token is useless because this username is nowhere to be found in our database. So how do we solve this problem? So we are going to go back to IntelliJ, to our IDE, right? So we're going to go back to the controller. So I'm just going to close this down for now. Close it down. And I'm going to close this, no, just open this. Where's our controller? So I'm going to close this property file, right? And let me quickly open our controller here. So before the call to generate the token, we are going to authenticate the user. We're going to make sure that that user exists in our database, is a valid user, right? So not every user, not everyone that enters username and password should be generated token for, right? So we're going to make sure that a token is generated for only valid users in our database. So how do we do that? So for that, we are going to use the authentication object, the authentication class, to authenticate our users. So we're just going to say authentication. So here, before a call to generate token, we're going to call the authentication to actually authenticate our user, right? So we're just going to say authentication here from Spring Security here. So we're going to say authentication, right, equals auth manager. So here we're going to auto-wire and the authentication manager here. So we should have private. We're going to create a bin of authentication manager because that authentication manager is what is the class, is the bin that the authentication is going to be delegated to authenticate and get our object inside here, right? So now we're going to say authentication manager. So I'm just going to authentication manager. Where's the manager here? Here. Authentication manager. And here we're just going to say auth manager here. And this one we're going to auto wire already here. So for that, we're going to make it finer so that it can be, so have finer. Okay. So here we're just going to say the auth manager dots. So here we're going to authenticate. Now, what are we going to use? We're going to authenticate the username and the password, right? So there now we're going to use new username password token, new username password authentication token, right? And here I'm going to break this down so we see it clearly. And here we're just going to pass the username here. So we're going to say auth request. We're going to say, oh, sorry. So here we're just going to say, I'm not going to copy this, right? Auth request. So here we're going to say auth request dot get username dot get username here. Get username and the password. Get username and auth request dot get password. And here I'm going to, let me just make it a full screen. And here we're just going to terminate there. So now we're actually getting this here. Now the basic authentication we created, which is the basic one we used before, is just like it's a form based, right? That's just a basic authentication. But this one right now is JWT authentication. So which means the authentication manager here is actually going to authenticate using the username and the password, right, for authentication. So now here we're going to check if a user is being, if the user is valid, right? So now we're just going to say if authentication dot is authenticated, then we should, that's the only when this one should be generated. If the user is a valid user, that is only when the token should be generated. Else we're going to throw error, throw new user name not found, right? Let's have a username not found here. And we're just going to specify a simple message here, invalid user credentials. So we're going to say credentials, invalid user credentials here, credentials, and we're going to say stop here, full stop, right? So what we just did here is that before the token should be created, the user must be authenticated. That it should be only, the token should only be created for only valid users in our database, not every user that can have access to token creation, right? So now we're going to run this. We're going to run this to see how it works now. Okay, here we are having an error. Constructor user required a bin of type authentication manager. Okay, sorry, we've not created this bin. So now we're going to go to our configuration and create a bin called authentication manager, right? So here we're just going to say public so here we're just going to create a bin called public authentication manager. We're going to call this auth manager, right? And we're going to have the authentication configuration in here. And we're going to call this auth configuration. I'm going to make it short, just like call it auth config, and make it auth config, right? Auth config. And here we're just going to return, what are we returning here? We're going to return auth config dot get authentication manager .get authentication manager, and we are going to throw this exception, and we're going to annotate this with bin annotation. Bin annotation, right? So here we're going to annotate this with bin annotation, and now we are going to run it again to see what we got so far. So now we see that our project has started without any error. So let's go to Postman to see if we can create a token for this user right now, because this user is not a valid user in our database, right? So let's try to see. So right now we have unauthorized. So unauthorized. So this one's supposed to mean here. Where is it? Yeah, unauthorized. So which means the user is not authorized. There's no user like that in our database, right? So let's try to use a user that is valid in our database. So let's have Rita, right? And now if I hit on send, let's see. So here we got a token for the user, because that user doesn't exist. That other user does not exist in our database. So now we've succeeded at authenticating the user to make sure that only valid user from our database can actually have the authentication token. So here we can see that we have rita@gmail.com, which is a valid user in our database. So if I look here right now, we see that we have Rita in our database, right? She's a valid user in our database. So now we have generated token for her already. So right now, if we go back here, let me try to say, okay, now let's copy this. Of course, this user cannot access secured endpoint. So let's create for a user that is admin, so we can test try to create. So we can try to create we try to access the secured endpoint, right? So now I'm going to create a token for this user. Remember, this user is a valid user, it's an admin user in our database, right? So now I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to copy this token, and so now let's try to go here and get all books from our database. So here we have all books, right? So now let's try to delete books from our database, because we see that only users with, I'm going to remove this token here first. We see that only user with the admin access that you'll be able to delete. So here, if we have this as bearer token, without authentication, let's try to hit this. Let's look how many books we have in our database yet. Get all books. So we have book with ID 2 and and ID 8. So now I'm going to come here to say delete a book with ID number 2 here. Here we have unauthorized. So now I'm going to paste the token we just created for this guy. Now remember this token here, if we go to JSON website and paste this token here, we see that it's for the user with the admin. Here, you see here. So this one we have the username, right? We have the username. So now we're going to go back to Postman to see if this user can delete right now. It's not admin, should be able to delete. But right here, we are still having unauthorized. So why are we having unauthorized? Now, if you remember, before Spring 2, in previous version of Spring 2 or Spring Boot 2, we have to append this bearer here, something like this called bearer, right? Or something like this, just like this bearer here. So it's going to be like this here, right? But right now, this bearer has been moving to Spring 2.7.8 or something like that onto Spring 0.3. We no longer have to add this one here. It's added automatically. Okay, so that bearer is added here automatically, so we don't have to add it manually. Now, for all this token right now is useless, because now the security doesn't know how to, it doesn't know the owner of this token, right? It doesn't know the owner of this token. So it has to extract. So what we do right now, we have to extract the username. We have to validate this token. We have to check this token, the username and the validity of this token, in order for the user of this token to have access to this. So for that, we're going to create filter, and that filter is going to filter the username and password, extract the username and password, just like we see here, right? Like we see here. So we're going to extract this guy out from here, and using the secret, we're going to decode this token using the secret key here, so that the username can be extracted, and the expiration time also can be extracted. Because if this expiration time, if the token has expired already, then the token is not valid. And if this user here does not exist in our database, the user is not valid. You should not be able to access any endpoint. So what we're going to do right now is to write some logic that we extract the username here and the expiration time of the token before the user should be able to get access to any secured endpoint here. So for that, we're just going to swing over to our ID, right? And start implementing that filter. So for that, I'm going to shut down the server. Then we're going to come here and start implementing this filter. Okay. Now we're going to start implementing the filter. So for that, I'm just going to open up this filter class that we created the other time, right? Here we're going to write the first thing we're going to do here is to extend. Here we're going to extend the once per request filter, right? So we're going to extend this, and we're going to implement the method here. So this one here, and we're just going to click on OK, right? And before we move further, I'm just going to make this one here a component. So we're just going to annotate this with a component annotation, and we're going to break this down, right? So now this is our request and this is our response, right? Before now, we're going to go back to, I'm just going to go here to the JWT service class. And for time, we have a couple of methods to write here to extract the claim, the username, to validate the token, and so on and so forth. So I don't want this video to be too long. So for that, I'm just going to paste some method here that will explain how it works. Okay. So here, I'm just going to fix some things here. So I'm just going to fix this. Yeah. So now these are some methods that you see, this is the one we created last time. And this one here are the ones I just pasted here, the one I wrote before. So I just pasted them here to save the time. Now, as you can see here, this method here, the work of this method is to extract the username from the token, right? And this is the subject here. So the claims, like last time we said, the claims actually is the payload, which is the user information for in the JWT, right? That is the claims. So like username, the roles of the user, the expiration date, and all those things. So now we are getting the subject, and the subject here is the username, right? So we are extracting the username from the token, and here we are extracting the expiration time from the token here. You know, last time the payload actually contains also this expiration time, right? So that is what this method is doing here. And this method here is to validate the token, right? So you can see that we are making use of the username here, the extracted username here from this token, and we are returning here the username and the expiration date of the token. So we're going to see if the username is valid or not, or the token has expired or not. So, you know, if the token has expired, it means it's of no use anymore. So we're trying to check to make sure the token has not expired, right? So that is the validation method here. And this one here is the method we create just to extract all claims, right, from the token here. So this is the token, and this is the claim we are validating, right? So we are extracting all claims from the token here. So this is what this method is doing. And this one here, extract claims. So we are making use of the all claims here, right? And this is the actual method that is extracting all the claims here. So we can see that we are using this signing key here. And what is the signing key? Just like last time we make use of the secret, we created a secret, right? And if you go back to the JWT token to see the three elements of JWT, we have the header, the payload, and the verify signature. So this signing key here is a digital key that is used to verify the signature of the token, to verify if the token is authentic or not. If the user claims are true or not. So this one is the digital key to sign or to verify the token and the signature in the token, right? And here we just trying to extract, we're just checking the expiration date of the token to make sure the token is not an expired one, right? So this is what all this method is doing here. So that is the method we just pasted here right now. And this project is currently present in my Git repository. So there's a link below this video. So you just follow the link and download the project. So you can actually open up in your IDE and try to understand this code. Read this code and try to understand exactly what they do, right? Okay, cool. So now we are going to go to the authentication filter class, and we are going to start implementing this method that we just override, right? So now the first thing we're going to do here is to get the header. We're going to request the header, the authentication header, right? So the request header, right? So for that, we're going to create a string variable to extract the header, to get the header of the authentication, of the authorization, right? Or maybe of the request, the header request, right? So here we're just going to say string equals request dot get header dot get header, right? And what header are we trying to get from here? So if we go back to Postman, we see that I'm just going to open up this here, and this is the header, right? This is where we find the authentication, because this is where the authentication token is. And so we are going to get this here because we have different headers here, right? We have params, we have authorization, we have this, we have this, we have this. So now what we're trying to get here is this very authorization here, so we can extract the token from in here, right? So now let's go there and say authorization. Now I'm just going to terminate this. So now after this, we are going to check if there is a token in the header, if the header contains a token, right? So here we're going to say if auth header not equal none, and so if auth header not equal none and the auth header start with bearer here space, and we're going to explain this bearer in a moment. Equals auth header dot substring. So we put this as 7, right? And this one here, I'm just going to create this method. So I'm going to have string, I'm going to have string token. So the token we're going to have here, and we're just going to set this to none. Set this to none. And now Right. So now we are trying to extract from here. We're trying to check the authorization, the header authorization. Now, so now we're trying to check if there is a bearer, if there is a token right present in the header, in the auth header, right? So, and if there's a token, so we're trying to ask if that token starts with bearer, right? So we're going to come back to explain this bearer in a moment. So right here, we're going to get the username. We're going to extract the username also from the header, from the authentication header, right? So now I'm just going to say username equals, right here, we're going to call, there's a method we created right now in, among the method we pasted in the JWT services. So we're going to call one of these methods right now. So to extract the username from the token, right, that we have just gotten from here, because right now here we have gotten a token. So we'll check here if there's a token in the authorization head. So we're trying to extract this bearer. So I'm going to explain this bearer in a moment, right? Now, after extracting this, we're going to be left with the original token right here. So now this token actually contains the username, because the username, the expiration date, and every other information, which is the payload, which are those are the claims, right? They are all encoded in the token. So now that is what we're going to extract. So we're going to extract the username from the token here right now. So for that, we're going to call a method from the JWT service class we just created, right? And for that, I'm going to inject. So we're going to inject the JWT service class in here so we can get the method from that class, right? So here I'm just going to say private JWT service. Man, this is going to be service. Come on, yeah, the service, and just call it service, JWT service. And this one here, we're going to auto wire. So for that, I'm going to use the Lombok annotation here. I'm going to say required arg constructor. So for that, we're going to make this as finer, right? Yeah, so this one as finer. Now I'm going to call the JWT to extract. We're going to call the method here, extract, service. This one, service dot extract username from token. Cool. So this one of the method we just pasted. So we're going to pass the token here, the token we've extracted from the header. We're going to paste here, right? So what we have done now, after this, we're going to continue. So let's check. So after this, right now, we're going to check if there's a user, if there's a username present in that token, right? So now we're just going to do this. So if username, that is the username there, username. Okay, we've not declared this, so I'm just going to declare this up here as well. So we'll have string username. So now we're just going to set this to none, right? We're just going to initialize it to none. So now we're going to come down here to check if there is a username present in this token. So we're going to check for valid username in this token, right? So for that, we're going to have this here. So if username is not equal none, and security, so we're going to check if there's any authenticated user right there, right? So for that, we're just going to call this security context holder dot get context dot get authentication here. And now we're going to pass here authentication. We're going to check if that thing is none, equals none here. So if this one is none, then what we're going to do next? So what we did here is that now if this user here, if there's a user here, username here, right, and that user is not a valid user from our database, which means it has not been authenticated. If the username has not been authenticated, this one will appear, will return true. It will be none, right? But if the user has been authenticated, then it means this context, this one here is going to hold the user. So this one is not going to be known. So now we're going to check if we have a valid user present in the token, right? That's what we'll try to do here right now. So now, next we're going to call the user details. User details. This coming from the Spring. This coming from Spring. We can use this or we can use our own, right? Because last time we created a custom library user details. So we're going to use our custom library user details here. We are going to do this here, right? So this we're just going to call user details. So equals. So for now, we're going to inject our user details service here. So we're going to bring in our own custom user details services we created last time here, and we're just going to call this user service. In case you didn't watch that video, please the link is below this video. Try to watch that video, the one we did before this, so for you to know how we implement those user details, the user details service, before we go to this point right now. Okay, the link is below. Just follow the link and download the source code from my Git repository, and you just try to watch the video for explanations, right? Now we're going to make this private as well, because we're going to be let's just set access modifier here, and this one's going to be fine as well, because we're going to be auto wiring this. We're going to inject this in here. So now we're going to say, okay, if the user has, if there's a username here and the user has not been authenticated, then we are going to call the user service to upload or to load that user to check the user from the database and load it out, so that that user can be authenticated, right? So for that, we're just going to say user service dot load user, right, by username, and we're going to pass this username in there, right? Username right here. Cool. What is happening here? User details. Okay. Okay, so we're going to, let's try to remove this and see. Okay, so let's use the one from Spring Security Direct, right? Okay, now let's check. So we are going to check, we're going to make another check from here, right? Again, so after uploading this, we're going to check again if, so we're going to validate the token after getting this from the database. So we're going to validate the token we're having against this username, if it's correct or not, right? If it's a valid user from the database or not, right? So for that, we're just going to we're going to call the user name password authentication token to actually authenticate the token, to check if the username that is present in the token is a valid user from the database, right? So that's what we're going to do right now. So for here, I'm going to create a var variable here. I'm going to call this one auth token. Token, right? And I'm going to assign this to new username password authentication token. This one here. No, this here. So we're going to make use of this, and now we're going to pass in the token and the user details, right? So we just have the token and we're going to have the user details here, just like that. So what we're doing here is that when we load the user from database, now we're going to validate this user we just loaded. You know, the user is present here already, right? So we're going to validate this user. If the user name, if the user information here corresponds with the claims in this token, right? That is what we're trying to do right here, right now. And now we're just going to say auth token dot set details new web. So new web authentication, new web authentication detail source here. And this one here, we're going to build the details here. So I'm just going to say dot here. We're going to say dot build details. And right now we're going to pass our request here, which is the request we gotten, right? So we're going to pass the request here. So after that we're going to call the security. We're going to call the security context again here. So just a security context. This is incorrect. Security context holder, this one here, dot get context dot set authentication. Then now we're going to pass the auth token, right? Auth token here. And after that, we're going to pass the filter chain here. I'm just going to come out from here. Here. So we're going to we're going to come out from here and just call the filter. So we'll have the filter chain dot do filter here. So we're going to pass in the request and the response, right? Okay, just like that. Cool. So let's have a brief explanation to some of these things here. So now quickly here we get the header, we get the request header, which is the authentication header, like I've shown here on Postman, right? Here we are getting this header right from here. And now we are trying to check if this header contains a token, and if that token starts with bearer here. If yes, then we are extracting out this bearer here, which is this string here, seven characters, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, right, plus the white space. Now after extracting this here, we are left with the original token. Now this token here contains the header, which is the algorithms, right, and the payload, which is the claims, and the verified signature. So now the claims, which is the payload, consists of the user information, such as the username, the full name, the authorities of the user, the expiration date of the token, and so on and so forth. So now we're trying to extract excuse me. So now we're trying to extract the username from the token, right from here. Now after extracting the username from the token, we want to see if that username we extracted from the token is actually a user from the database, right? So that is what we do here. So we check if the username is empty. So if the username is not empty and the user is not authenticated, so now we are trying to call the user detail from the Spring Security Framework to actually get the user detail service to load that user from the database using the username we extracted from the token here. So after getting that, we are going to authenticate that user that we got from the database against the username we got from the token, right, to see if it is a valid user from the database or not, right? So now after that, we've set the user details to the token here, and we just build it here. So then we call the security context holder to actually hold, to set the authenticated token as for the user, right? So that is what we have done here. So now we see that we are done with our creation, the filter implementation, right? And also we are done with all these things, all this method we just pasted here in our JWT service. So like I said, the link to this code is below this video. Just follow the link and go to my Git repository to download this project and actually go through this code and understand how it works properly, right? Okay, cool. So now we are going to test run our project, but before then we're going to go back to our security config to change some configurations here, right? So that's what we're going to do right now. So now we are going to, before we're using HTTP basic authentication, which is username and password, which is that is where we stopped in our last video, right? So now we are going to remove this from here. We are going to move this to JWT Authentication instead. So now I'm just going to do, the first thing we're going to do here is to enable the session management here. So here we enable the session management, and we are going to specify the section policy creation here. We're going to set this to stateless policy, right? So here we just say stateless policy, because we're not going to be saving anything to our cookies, right? So now I'm going to break this down so we can see it clearly. So the next thing we're going to do here is to set the authentication provider, right, to the authentication management, because the authentication management actually makes use of the authentication provider to authenticate the given user credentials, right? So that's what we're going to do right now. So now I'm going to call the authentication manager here, authentication provider, right? And here we're going to provide our own authentication, but we're going to come back here in a moment. So now I'm just going to do that. So right now we're going to add the filter that we've created, this auth filter we created. So for that, we're going to come here to inject the filter right here. So I'm going to say private auth. No, the name is JWT, right? JWT auth filter. Good, here. And I'm going to call this authentication filter, right? And I'm going to make it finer as well, because we're going to inject it through this guy here we got from Lombok, right? So now I'm going to provide here our auth provider. Oh no, not here, sorry. We're going to provide our auth filter here, auth filter, and we're going to specify the username password authentication filter from the Spring security framework. So what we're doing here is that, so we are telling Spring Security to make use of our filter before making use of the username password authentication filter from the framework, right? Now we are going to create our authentication provider so we can provide our own here. So for that, I'm going to just come here and create another bean here. So I'm going to create another public bean here. You know, actually all beans are public. There's no private bean. So we're just going to create a new bean here called authentication provider. So I'm going to call this one here authentication provider, right? And I'm just going to call this auth provider. So what we're going to do here is to get the DAO authentication provider. So for that, I'm just going to have a variable here called auth authentication provider equals new DAO, this guy here. We're going to pick this guy here, DAO authentication provider. And now we're going to, what happened here? Okay, it's correct. So now we're going to come here and say auth provider, authentication provider. For us not to be confused, anyways, no problem. There's no confusion here. So we're just going to set the user details here, user details. And here we have already injected our user details here, this user detail, which we created last time, right? So now we're going to just pass in our user details here, user details. And then we are going to set the password encoder. So we're just going to say auth provider.set password encoder. Set password encoder. Then we're going to provide the password encoder bean we've created here. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to copy. I'm going to move this bean down here, so we'll have them in the same row, right? So now we are going to set this here as the password encoder we've created the last time. Then the last thing we're going to do here is to return is to just return the auth provider, and I'm going to stop it here, right? Okay, this is cool, right? So this is all we have to do here, and now we're going to pass in here our auth provider. So the auth provider we just created, we're going to pass it here. Cool. So now I'm just going to break this down so we have a clear view of what we're doing here. So I'm going to break this down, and I'm going to break this down as well. And okay, cool. So this is all we have to do. We'll just wipe off this white space, and let's check if everything is okay. All right, so right now we're going to run our project and see if everything is cool, right? So I'm just going to hit on the play button here. All right, so here we can see that our project has started, and there are no errors, right? So right now we are going to go to Postman to test our project. So what we're going to do here, I'm just going to go back to the auth API we created, and now we are going to try to generate a token for this user. This is not a valid user in our database, right? So I'm just going to try if we can create a token for this user. So here we have forbidden, unauthorized. So this user is not a valid user from our database. So now I'm going to put a valid user here from our database, and let's see if a token can be generated for this user. Okay, cool. So right now we see that a token has been generated for a valid user in our database. So just to refresh our memory, let me go back to our user table in the database and select all users. So here you see we have two users. We have Rita and we have Samson here. And Rita is a user and Samson is an admin, right? So these are the two users we have in our database right now. And now we are able to generate a token for this user. So let's see if this token can work. So let's go here because remember last time we logged down these APIs, right? This, and this. So now we're going to go to create new books. So now there is a token here, the one I used to test last time. So you see this BR here. This is what it used to be in Spring Boot version before Spring Boot 2.8 3 Spring Boot 3 and the current version of Spring Boot. So I'm just going to remove this. So before we paste our token, I'm going to hit this endpoint to see if we can create new books or not. Here we have forbidden. So here we have the body of the book, but we are getting forbidden here because we have to log in. So what we're just going to do here is to paste the token here. So remember that the bearer has been prepended by default by Spring Security Framework, right? So now I'm going to hit on this again if we can create books or not. So this one here is still showing forbidden, right? Here, let's go back here, and it's still showing forbidden. It means it has not been recognized. So let's try to find out why we're having forbidden still here. Okay guys, so now I've seen the problem. So the reason why we could not create a book last time was because of a little error I made in the code. So now let's quickly try to generate another token for our user. What happened again? Okay, let me just remove this. No authentication. So now let me hit this again and see if we. Okay, cool. So now we have a token here. So let's copy this and let's go back here to add a new book, right? So I'm just going to paste this here. Your authentication, right? And so now I'm going to open up here again, and so let's see, we have a token here and we have the body. So let's create a new book. Okay, cool. So now we see that we can create a new book here. So let's go back to the authentication, and I'm going to create, let's generate a token for a user that is not an admin. So this user is not an admin, so it should not be able to create book. So you should not be able to add book to the database, right? So now I'm going to generate a token for this user. It's a non-admin user. So let me get this token here. Just copy and go back here, go to authorization and replace. Here, and let's replace this token. Just remove it and replace, right? So now let's see if this user can add another book or not. You see, she cannot add book because she's not an admin, right? So we see that it's working. So what actually happened was here. The reason why we couldn't add book last time was here. I did not check the credentials. This line of code here, that was what happened. What I did was that I mistakenly passed the token, and I mistakenly passed the same token and user details here. I'm supposed to pass this one, user details, the credentials. For now, we don't know the credentials, then user details that get authorities. So that is what I'm supposed to pass here. After checking this here. So that is the reason why we could not create the admin user could not create a book, even though he's an admin user, right? So now we see that this authentication, this one here is not an admin, right? This user is not an admin, but we are trying to create a book, but she is trying to add a book to the database with her token. So therefore, she cannot add. Now, but if we go back to if we change to the admin user, for example, here. So if we change to the admin user like this and go back here like this, and let's generate this token. So now I copy again and copy, and I go back here and paste. I'm going to remove this and replace here. So now we should be able to create a book because this one is an admin user. So let me hit on create. So you see we are able to create a book, right? So now let's get all the books we have from the database, all the books we have. So here we have all books here. So we have 2, 8, 9, 10, 11, like 4 books, right? We have, or maybe 5 books from the database. So now we see that everything is working fine, right? Just as expected. So that is the goal of this demo. So now we have successfully implemented the JWT token authentication, JWT authentication, so to speak. And so this brings us to the end of today's demo. Please, the link, like I said, the link to this project is down below this video. So just follow the link, go to my repository and download the code, the project, set up the project in your IDE, and try to go through all the project, go through all the codes and all the customization we made, all the configurations we made. So try to go through and understand it better. So thank you guys for coming, and thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Just try to support me by subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much, and don't forget to thumbs up. So if you like the video, please thumbs up, and please don't forget also to introduce or to share my videos with your friends. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you again in our subsequent demo. Thank you, and goodbye.